the name Nick Martucci when you were at Zimmerman?
Uh-uh.
Okay. And that makes sense because he was gone before you started. But long story short, it's 11. We'll talk later. He wants to move to LA and he's going to be doing some stuff for us. So,
Cool. Very cool. All
yeah.
right. It looks like it's queuing. All right, we are officially live, ladies and gentlemen. This is my first live stream with a guest, and I'm honored to have my buddy David join us. David, how are you this morning, man?
Well, man, thanks for having me on. I've been watching the videos you've been doing for a little bit, and I'm glad that you continue to push it.
Well, I don't know. Those videos, I know eventually I'm going to look at those and regret a lot of those, but I'm glad this keeping you interested. So,
Of course, and
yeah.
don't be ashamed of your roots, where you started.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, yeah. First, I want to say in LA right now is really cold and foggy. How's the weather where you're at?
Yeah, so I live in Miami in the Coconut Grove neighborhood, and we actually, sorry to rub it in, we've actually got a really nice day today. It's
Great.
like 82, 83, sunny, a little bit of breeze, so it's where you want it to be.
I,
It comes your way soon.
I think the rest of the world is going like you're living in Southern California, you're living in Miami area. Like you guys always have good weather. Like this is like first world problems to the nth degree.
Exactly. My family's all still in Rochester, New York, and they've been getting snow as recently as last week. So I'll take what I got. I'm happy.
Yeah, man, love Rochester. I could use a garbage plate right now. That sounds really delicious.
Have we not discussed this? I had no idea that you had a frame of reference for Rochester.
Oh yeah, I went to St. Bonaventure, which is about two hours west. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
So
They made the NCAA tournament briefly a few years ago, I think.
yes, sir, yes, sir. Yeah, and then Wegmans is probably the best grocery store ever. So
Of course. Yeah, you can't beat it. Every day you get their best. That's their slogan. Got the strive for 5 fruits and vegetables every day, the 5 servings. I love that place, man.
yeah, man. All right, so enough catching up, I guess. Like, so one of the things that I want to, well, let's do this. First, introduce yourself and what you do so that people who don't know you get a frame of reference.
Yeah, sure. So David Barry, as Tony said, I'm the founder of DB& Partners. We're a small digital agency based out of Miami. And we focus, like I said, in digital media in general, but we've got a real specialty in the paid and performance side of social media in particular. And been around for 4 years. We just had our 4th birthday, and we don't look a day over 3. And yeah, we work with a host of different brands. Some of them are bigger known brands. A lot of them are what I call aspiring challenger brands who have a lot of good parts of rather good ingredients for a recipe to build success. And yeah, we got a team of 5 with some freelancers we work with, and we love what we do.
Dude, I love it. One of the things that I've had a lot of conversations with people in the industry and just a lot of shop owners and different agency heads and stuff like that. Like, how's that been like? And like, give us like, what's DB& Partners doing that's a little bit different or even motivational?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that you asked because I think everybody wants to like do content right now and sort of project this feeling of confidence and everything's good and we're good, we're thriving, we're pushing. And the reality is we know for just about everybody that's not really the case. So yeah, we've seen a reduction in some clients who had very first person touches with their clients. So for example, a chain of med spas that we worked with shut down entirely. You can't deliver those services to people if you're not open. We've had others who have had to retract certain services, bring some of them in house and things like that. So we certainly had to tighten our belts. But it's very interesting because, and this is sort of a cliche, but it still remains true, which is you can just take what's given to you and sort of cower in that and say, oh well, it's happening to everybody, and to some extent that's true. But it presents opportunities where they previously didn't exist. And one of the things I think our team realized early on was the businesses that were pulling funds in-house were hurting in their own right. And obviously we're going to have to be pulling internal staff, either furloughs that were part of the equation or layoffs and things like that. So just because we were getting paid less didn't mean our value was less. And in fact, on the contrary, it became increasingly obvious to us that if we came to the table with things that were normally, quote unquote, outside of our scope of work, we would have an audience that was probably very receptive to things that they would not have been receptive to when things were, business as usual.
Yeah.
So we've had an opportunity to sort of entrench ourselves in new ways with ideation for a lot of our clients in spaces that are not usual. And then I would also say, perhaps for me personally as a business owner, I've had a chance to do, I guess if you want to count this one, it's my third webinar this month, which is 3 more webinars than I had ever done in my entire life.
Yeah.
And there's a real appetite, especially I'll say in the small business space where a lot of them don't even know what a Google My Business listing is, or
right.
Like what is organic reach, things like that. There's so much ambiguity on a lot of the basics. And so you have an opportunity to step in for small businesses and help them in a way that they've not received help before. And I'll give you one more example, which is a longer answer to your question. But we'd had a client that we had been on our radar for a long time. It's a hospital specifically, and had been wanting to work with them. And for a handful of reasons, it just never got off the ground. So I reached back out and said, look, I see that you guys are trying to run a capital campaign, which I noticed through following them on LinkedIn and Facebook. I said, how about you give us 30 days? We'll come in and we'll run this campaign for you on paid social, and we'll audition. I'm not going to charge you. We're going to help your hospital raise money. If you don't hire us after, oh well. For 30 days, we had an opportunity to do something good for a hospital that we care about. And at best, you guys are going to see that we're exactly what we said we were, and you'll want to work with us moving forward. And those are opportunities that didn't exist before. So, all in all, yeah, revenue's down, but I feel as fulfilled and optimistic as I have at any point in 4 years in the business.
And I love that last point that you're making, because, the natural instinct is just to go like, man, pandemic, it's just killing me. There's nothing I can do. And I think, there's so much more opportunities, actually. People are saying like, some people are going to get insanely rich and create businesses and create economies based around this, and we just don't know what those are yet. And those are people that are taking every single opportunity and, not just saying, woe is me and things like that. And then, especially for you, you're not just a one person band, right? You said you're a team of 5. So, I love that.
Yeah, it's and that's another part too, right? Like if it's just me, perhaps I can say, well, I've got less, to worry about. But the reality is, I brought each of those people on with the hope that I would never have to make a pay cut, whether it was, something of my own making or a global pandemic of this nature. And knock on wood, we're heading in the right direction. Exactly. My desk is like an aluminum, so I don't know.
Well, I can also knock my head. I got enough wood around here, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll knock on my shelf over there.
Yeah. The one thing I think not a lot of people know is our connection, which is kind of like by proxy a little bit, because you were at Zimmerman Advertising right before I was, and then I think the first account that I was basically working on was one of the accounts that you were working on, and then we've never crossed paths when I was in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and then years later, power of social media connects us, and here you are, the first guest of my live stream. So what a crazy whirlwind that is.
It is wild, and everybody's had their experience, at least in our circle, down in South Florida, at Zimmerman and stuff like that. And it's great. It's in a lot of ways, it's like the college that we all went to, and we sort of share where we all cut our teeth to, collect our skills. And it's awesome to see where the quote unquote graduates go in their career. And even if they didn't necessarily work together like us, we shared that experience in different times, and we kind of know what it takes. So yeah, I'm thrilled too.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't even think about even asking you this. What's the craziest things that happen? Craziest thing you think you can share that happened, and then I'll share you mine.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if I should share this, but hey, we'll find out after.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat right now.
Yeah. So we had a client was a recent hire. I'm sorry. On the client side, they had brought on a new employee that was brought in from a large entertainment organization. I'll leave, company names on this. And she was the type of person who would sort of name drop that company in every opportunity that she had, whether it was on a phone call or an email, like, oh, well, when I was here, here, we did this, that sort of thing. And so she sent through an email at one point that my team agreed had an idea that was objectively terrible. So I went and removed her from the email and sent the note to my team, and I was like, oh, I guess that must be what they did at quote unquote big entertainment company over there. Huh? Like, what do you think, superstar?
Mm-hmm.
But I actually sent it directly to that person at the client, and I had just made a great presentation in front of my boss, and that email went out, and I had to run back upstairs while he was still in the room and tell him that I had screwed up in a major way and insulted our client. Now, fortunately, it didn't blow up the way that it could have. But it was a humiliating moment, and one that I'm cautious to never repeat.
Oh my god, I'm sure you're seeing all the replies now, like reply CCs, and reading that all, of making sure nothing is out of whack.
You got to double and triple check.
Oh my gosh, so funny. Yeah, I guess my craziest moment was when I was part of the interviewing process, and this person, checked off every single box. Just everybody liked it. There was one reservation I had of this person, but it was like irrelevant to, I guess, like what ended up happening, right? But we move with the job offer. The person is assimilating pretty decently. I wouldn't say like the best, but it's the first couple weeks, like you see it, and then one day just comes into work, goes straight into the top floor. Has all the offices on the left side. I'll just say it was one of the first ones. Just opens the door, comes in, resigns, leaves out. And my office is in the fishbowl office, so I'm like seeing this all unfold in my peripheral, going like, "What the fuck is happening?" So, I've never seen a resignation like that, and like some are like you see it coming. This one I just came in, did it, big event, out. Like it was, yeah.
Some people have their ways; they do it triumphantly. I had. Well, I'm sure we could go down that path because now it's reminding me of some other ones.
Yeah, I know. While there was a couple that I'm like, ooh, I want to share, except like, no, like I don't think I can. But I'm pretty sure the VP of HR is still friends with me, so he might be like one of the people listening on the stream. So I'm not even sure on that one. But on a lighter note, I mean, I think we got to work on some pretty good clients, and there was some big things. Like, let's talk a little digital marketing. Like, what's a fun campaign that you remember that if you share, you think the learnings are still applicable and like that could translate well for businesses?
When you asked the question, the first thing that actually came to mind was prior to being at Zimmerman. I was at Crispin, Porter, and Bogusky in 2013. And that was at a point where social media was emerging, and people who were quote unquote millennial aged knew what it was because it was quickly becoming a part of how we communicated with people. But it was not the business, space that we've seen it become over time. So I had an opportunity to work on MetLife at CPB. And we were looking at a campaign for Mother's Day one year that would allow us to sort of kind of like everybody does the same thing, right? It's in some ways, and you've seen videos of this online, sort of poking fun at the way every brand seems to be talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. It's like we're all in this together. Very aerial shots of empty streets, right? Like it's the same thing, rinse and repeat. So we were like, okay, we don't want to just create some other cheesy cliche for moms. So what we actually did was the opposite. We blacked out our entire social media account. We made our profiles black, our cover images black on every channel, and essentially our message was like, if you really care about mom, get the hell off of social media and prove it to her. And that was cool. It was by no means the biggest campaign that we ever ran, but it was counterintuitive in a lot of ways that people believe the only thing you can do with social media is create, which 90% of the time, or more than 90% of the time, is exactly how it is. But there's something to be said for being antisocial if you're reinforcing better behaviors. And that was the first campaign I'd been a part of where we were able to think in that way, which was a little counterintuitive. And and I liked it. My mom was happy about it too.
No, I love it. I actually kind of want to keep going down this because I think you hit on some interesting points where people in social feel like it has to be only paid, right? Or it has to be content driven, or there needs to be huge content strategy. And sometimes it's taking a stance of what is right. Like on Mother's Day, going black and saying like, listen, stay off social media, go tell them you love them. That's a thing that doesn't just end there, right? It's not just a campaign that just happened and people forget. Like it could potentially have legs. You could keep that as a brand. Like certain companies, every Mother's Day could do that, and they can be known and have that, affinity for a long time. Or it's that one-time thing, but people will remember you for that in one moment, right? I think that is the most understated part. Is that everybody, and I think you and I coming from that college and that alumni is, if it doesn't lead to sales, it was not worth it. That's not always the case, right? There's a long-term thing and there's different ways to measure. And now the more that social media is getting kind of mature and we're seeing the data that falls in, those small things make a big impact for big brands. Like, yeah. Do you remember like when you guys were talking and like maybe even like internally before pitching to the client, did you guys get any pushback on like ideating that within the agency? Is like, no, that's not what we should be doing, or like, is there any stories like that?
In that instance, I will say actually no, we did not get a lot of pushback. But it's also to talk about the agency culture that you're living in. You mentioned, at Zimmerman, obviously it was very retail focused, and sales had to be the hook on everything we did, which for obvious reason. You live in retail and you live and die by that cash register. But CPB was, I will say, of the more traditional, agency mindset of where creative was really at the lead, and they were looking for quote unquote disruptive ways. I hate the word disruptive because I think it's so overused, but something unconventional, right? Like if we're looking at what everybody's doing, what are people not doing? In that sense, we had a lot of buy-in, and the reason I think we also had buy-in is, again, the stakes were very low. You're looking at MetLife, which is a Fortune 50 brand, and social media as a component of their business was so insignificant compared to everything else that they were doing 7 years ago, that I think it was a risk that people were willing to take at low stakes. But it brings up a point that I think you're getting at, which is if you think in a literal sense of input, output, outcome, yeah, you're gonna miss a lot of the stuff that's on the periphery that has a lot of benefit. And the reality is, people talked about this campaign, and like the things that get people talking on social media are rarely the things that are happening only on social media, right? Like culture in general, right, happens, all around us. It's not exclusively happening on the internet, but those are the things that we talk about there. So if you can find a way to, sort of buck that trend, and create culture of your own, or, do things that are counterintuitive, that's what gets people to talk. And, as we've gotten to a point now in time where it's not everything is like this last click attribution.
Yeah.
If they didn't click on the ad, it means it didn't drive a transaction. We know better, and we have data that supports that. And I think if you look at those opportunities, the brands who actually stand for something is where the opportunity lies.
Yeah, and to kind of go down that path now, when the pandemic happened, a lot of advertisers just pulled back, right? And some had legitimate reasons, like some were producing things in China and they can't produce things anymore, so it's not like they can spend the same amount and get the same return because they don't have enough inventory, or their product is outside events, and there's no outside events. So there's things like that happen. But one of the things that what I saw from a lot of big agencies is it resorted to just like what you said, a pan shot of empty streets saying we're here for you, kind of TV commercials, right? That was the extent of their strategy changing. And I don't think people took the long-term effects into account of like, can our brand stand for something here? Like, I think this is not the best example, but I liked where this was going, where State Farm is now putting a ton of ads that are talking about giving $3 billion back because they know that we're driving less. That's something that people will remember, right? And that's a statement that resonates versus we're here for you. And I think from an advertising spending standpoint, I didn't see a lot of brands that could have created like social content to talk about how to make your work from home situation better, or even if you don't want to tackle the people that are employed and tackle the unemployed, like what are the things you could be doing with your kids, and like how to make, like I felt like a lot of brands had like this infinite list of ideas that could be offering value, and yet they resorted to a 30 of empty streets, drone footage, and we're here for you. And it's very like, in those agencies, I wish there was more people like you that were saying like, hey, let's not create content, what about this new idea and stuff like that, right? And so I really think it's an important point that I just don't think a lot of advertisers are thinking, and agencies go fast, right? We have a lot of clients, a lot of needs, especially if you have a team. There's a lot of tactical things that you need to be doing, rotating in ads, different sales messaging, different testing, analytics, and sometimes you're just trying to push things out. And to me, there was a lot of brands that I think is going to regret it of having that message, and I think that part is very understated in marketing, especially in the social media age.
And it's funny too, because like we're talking about, let's say just generally speaking, we're talking the past 6 to 7 weeks where like, not that COVID's been around, but where it's really impacted, U.S. life, and people have sort of gone into quarantine. But I'll call it in the first 4 to 5 weeks, you've seen a lot of brands and individuals being very, very driven by fear. And I think of what you're looking at creatively is an output that is generated by like, we don't want to say the wrong thing. I mean, if you look at, the NFL draft a week ago, right? Yeah. Like that was devastation porn. It was just like, you're all heroes, like so many, sad things and stuff. And it was almost overblown to the point where you could see they were performing their sadness rather than actually, living it. And I think, brands that can dance, like get beyond that and be very specific. I love your State Farm example, right? It's acknowledging that there's something happening, and it's being specific about what that brand is choosing to do in the face of it. Specificity really matters. Like I gave a webinar yesterday, speaking to some restaurant owners and small business owners, and I'm saying like, it's not enough to just say, we're taking new safety measures. Okay, well, what the hell does that mean? Like be specific. If I'm trying to get a hold of you, like, when I go into the restaurant to pick up my food at delivery, like, are they wearing a mask? Are they wearing gloves? Can I give you my credit card over the phone so I don't have to, sign something right there in person? Like, that specificity matters. And I'm going, down a slightly different path right now, but if you translate that into content and messaging, specificity can have payoffs. And I'm with you. I think State Farm is going to reap some benefits from that, especially as consumers are really paying attention right now to what the brands are doing around them in their communities. And I can show you the opposite, which is, the Shake Shacks of the world and stuff getting PPP and getting slaughtered for it because it doesn't look good, especially when you're doing something on the opposite side that's better for the community around you. Yeah,
Shake Shack is a good example because I think, unfortunately, they'll always be known as this company now. The headlines already took over. Even if they returned it, no one's going to remember that they returned it. Like, it's very irrelevant. Just like Harvard getting that loan, they're like, of course Harvard. Like, they already had that problem, so I guess it's just piling on to already kind of like a diminishing returns of like people's perception. But like USC chose not to return it because they said they needed it, right? That's like adding like a more fuel. So, these I hope that people listening to this can take from that we shouldn't always be thinking just input output. And as an agency, and if you're a shepherd of a brand, I think it's your duty and, quite frankly, responsibility to your client, or if you are the client size, bring it up to say like, this, are we sure about this? Because there's long-term effects. Should we be thinking something else? Should we be zigging when everybody's zagging?
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Cool. So the other thing that I know you and I wanted to talk about was TikTok, and a lot of people bringing it up and what that means for their brand. So, I got to be fortunate to run a lot of TikTok brands when I was at one of my agencies. We were the first U.S. agency to ever try their self-serve platform. So we've seen a lot of I got to look at a lot of successes and look at different campaigns. I also saw some nightmares where we installed a click tag into a takeover, and basically when people exited out, it also registered as a click. So we were having so much additional dollars that went to the client of just like people exiting out that was meaningless. So I guess that's a long story to say TikTok is cool. It's a new ad platform. But what do you think? Like, where's your head at with? I'm sure you get clients asking this all the time, but like, what do you see of TikTok?
Yeah, it's funny. So in the spirit of transparency, we've had the question come in, but the reality is a lot of our brands, as of today, have not had the right opportunity to be in TikTok. That's not to say that we're not absolutely focusing on it as a big component of what we're hoping to implement, as the year goes on. Because the reality is, I mean, this is a channel with 800 million users, and don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's on track to become the fastest social network to reach 1 billion users, even though we got over 1 billion downloads and has for a while now. So in terms of scale, you can't ignore it. Like it's already crapping all over like your Snapchats of the world and stuff like that. My thoughts are scale. Obviously, like you have to pay attention to something that is getting such a dedicated audience to pay attention to the content that's being put out there. I think obviously like it's sort of known as the younger demographics channel. I think 41% of the users are like the 16 to 24 age range, stuff like that. And so you certainly keep that in mind. You're aiming at that younger demographic. But I think the thing that's really fascinating is the amount of time people spend on TikTok on a daily basis, and it's close to an hour.
Yeah.
Like if you could get that sort of on-site time, like on your own website, I mean, it would kill for that sort of.
Shoot, some people shoot for 3 minutes.
Yeah, exactly, and they're like jumping over seats to get that. So I think you want to look at stuff like that that's data driven, and then the other part too is, my answer is sort of more from a cultural perspective, right? There's this anecdote that exists too that seems as if like Generation Z and those who are perhaps even coming after them, kids even younger than that, they don't have the same view of celebrity that we do and people older than us do. And you could say that that's already been happening, but like, I'll give you an example, like Sky and Tammy, right? Like to my parents and to me, like prior to paying attention, like I don't know who the hell that is, but they've got 13.5 million followers on TikTok. You've got like Josh Richards, who's got over 15 million, Cash Baker, over 15 million, like all these names that don't mean anything. But the reality is if brands are not paying attention to who those people are, then they have no concept of who the decision-making influencers are, when it comes to the generation that they're going to need to harvest, moving forward. So from a tactical standpoint, I admit I don't have a ton of answers yet, but from a cultural and philosophical standpoint, and also really this intersection of music, right? It's happening now, I'm sure, on a smaller scale. It will happen when there's going to be like a top 100 artist who releases a major album through TikTok. It's going to happen. So record companies and stuff like that who can find a way to, co-create content there, use that for album release promotions and stuff like that are going to win. And I think brands that can find content creators, on their behalf to sort of be ambassadors to talk to, younger users, are absolutely going to have to live on TikTok and understand that music is a big driver there.
Yeah, no, I love the culture aspect you're saying, because I had a conversation with my dad yesterday, and he was talking about how Microsoft is never the first to market on anything. They just sit and wait, and they then create something better. And the example in social media is, remember Vine and how there were 6 seconds, but it was like a lot of shortcuts? People are taking advantage of it in TikTok, but with way more AR technology, way more frames, and way better content, and a way better library of like music license and stuff like that, right? Yep. It's an evolution. Snapchat, vertical, short to Instagram stories, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's funny that people are saying there's less innovation in social media, and it's true to a degree, but like learn from the history, right? I think the biggest benefit us brands that have been in this industry is that we've seen like things come in and go. And this, to me, is showing a lot of innovation. And it's the same thing that Vine would have done if they had better technology. and had more licenses. So, the other part that I do want to address is kind of the young demo situation. What I would say is if you think a platform's skewing young, it's also skewing very old because parents are always there, right? So then it's just missing the middle. But what I think people react to just as a gut reaction is always, oh, Pinterest, older females, moms, Facebook, Instagram, everybody, and Snapchat, younger, TikTok, all that, right? But what I find funny is that then there's also a thing of like, I want to target these audiences. Great, I can target them on every single platform. Well, I'm not sure they exist on Pinterest. No, they are there because you're telling me this is your audience, and without getting too technical, there could be third-party lists, first-party lists, whatever, right? I think brands that do it well, and it happens to be brands that are usually not huge, right? Not big and not corporate. They're creating content that's specifically for the platform versus creating content that just scaled across in a media way.
Right, exactly. It's branded first and then thrown onto a channel rather than created for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's like my own personal thing where I think like if you got to make a stance. If you're audience first, then really do audience first and create content, be on the platforms that you need. If you're saying you just want to get media across, well, that's a different game. But like, I don't think you should lie to yourself and confuse those two. And like, operationally, it becomes a very big nightmare. So, I think TikTok right now, from what I'm seeing, is a lot of Viners that did well. I'm seeing the same formula happening in TikTok. And so if somebody asks me like, what do you need to do in TikTok? I'm like, well, look at very popular Vine videos. See if your brand can do something, because I think there's a lot of unique, even restaurants, right? They could do a lot of funny hand washing videos or sanitizing videos, right? They could do a lot of curbside videos of showing what it is, right? It's just different cuts. You would do it differently on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, but I just want people to realize that, you should try all these, feel what's right for your brand, and then go all in. But if you're ever wondering what's the best, don't look at what's like happening best on the platform. See what's similar and see what was successful before, and like learn and like study it just like history. And I think it'll just become a better content creator and better marketer in general.
I agree. And I think one of the big brands that has figured that out and continues to figure it out, if you even look backwards at like what they were doing on Instagram and Snapchat, probably specifically Snapchat, was Taco Bell.
Yeah.
They're running, on Hulu. You can't ignore their the video that was created for TikTok that is running as an ad unit on Hulu, and probably other boxes as well. So I agree. That's you have to really embrace the technology that you're on, and if not, you're just going to come across as that stale brand who's like, oh, all the kids are on TikTok. Well, like what? How kids? We're here to make a TikTok. No, like you've got to be real. You've got to speak that language, and you have to relinquish a degree of control. I think to your point, that's probably why the smaller brands are probably seeing more success or more opportunities there, is because they're allowing themselves to be agile and not being so eager to control every part of the message. It's okay to relinquish some control if the brand values are there. You just have to recognize the execution is going to look different than what you're used to.
Yeah. So true. I know we're hitting the 30-minute mark. Let me actually look at the comments. Oh, Kelly McNamara. She said, "Hey guys,
hey,
long
Mac.
time." How are you, Kelly? I haven't talked to her in a while. I think she. Wait, does her agency work in Coconut Grove? No.
I think they're based in the Grove, but she's in North Carolina now.
Oh, okay.
We'll have to have Kate back on one of these times and get some more details on her.
Yeah, man, I feel like we should be like FaceTiming people and then like bringing the live stream. What's going on and catch up and like doing that. That'd be a fun video. We might want to do that again. But yeah, anything like anything you want to talk about in the last couple minutes, or just something you want to say to the audience? Just want to have it on tape.
Oh man, that's this is the one question I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer well. I would just say that just in general, whether you're, because I imagine there's like a diverse group of people. If they know us, then chances are they work in advertising.
Yeah.
They're probably at like a point in their career where they're doing some of the content creation or leading brands on a grassroots level, or they're making decisions from the top down. But I would say every time there's something like this happens, and you can look back at the 2008, 2009, economic downturn that happened then, it's always an opportunity. The things that came out of that were rooted from sort of like that, when you remove the floor and everybody feels like, okay, the playing field is flattened now to some extent, there's opportunity there. So I think now more than ever, if you want to be an agent for change or testing or new opportunities, this is the moment where people sort of feel this shared cultural apprehension about things not as usual. They're more open-minded than they otherwise would be to new opportunities, new ideas, and things like that. So I would say, whether it's TikTok or whether it's even just being more aggressive on your paid social media budget, for example. I know we briefly spoke about that yesterday, but this may surprise a lot of people. Of course, agencies everywhere are saying don't take off your ad dollars, but if you go onto social and digital channels right now, you are actually, and you have typically consumers in the e-commerce space, you're actually seeing better results than you were pre-coronavirus.
Oh yeah.
The reason being is competition is lower and ad efficiencies are better, so people are getting more for their dollars right now. So like, especially if you're trying to push your organization down a digital path, this is a really good time to revisit that conversation, because before it was just like, oh well, this is where people are, but we've done so well in traditional, we're going to stay this way. But now the conversation becomes, this is where our audience is. There's been I want to say like a 51% increase in online transactions since the beginning of coronavirus, and the ads are cheaper. Yeah. So it's sort of, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but now you can apply a rational argument from another side than before, which was perhaps just about digital in its own.
That ad point is so true. Like I think like a year from now, or maybe not that long, but people are going to be like, why is our performance down? Well, the corona thing messed our benchmarks. Or they're going to be lazy and use that excuse because it is so efficient right now. Like I can't understand, like when I'm talking to other people in Shopping Shop, they're like, yeah dude, I'm seeing like a 70% increased click-through rate. Like it's insane. My CPM's down 40%, which I haven't seen before in a conversion campaign. And it's I think the misconception is that it's like if it's easier to find your audience on digital media, then you're gonna have to bid less to get them. And it's like a logic that I think, like, if you're rooted into the platforms and seeing why it's harder to go after a niche audience because it's so expensive and doesn't give scale, well, now everything is giving way more scale because people are there. It's easier to get them. And this is why I feel like if certain agencies, and we'll see case studies that come on like a couple months from now, but I really think there's brands that are leaving a lot on the table. There's a lot of creative things that they can be doing, and it's going to be really efficient to do it, even for branding, and they're not taking a stance and they're not taking leverage of it. And I think that's going to be always the hardest trick, because I think I'm going to go on a little bit of tangent here, but agencies are very separated, right? Like media agencies, they execute media and that's it. Creative is done by somebody and give it to another agency, and like all that kind of like separation happens. And that is the worst case in things like this, because the media people could be screaming up to the top going, I'm seeing efficiencies you need to be doing. And there might be a confusion. It's like, well, you're dependent on media commission, so you're going to say that instead of really hearing them out. Creatives are going like, well, you need to do this, general brand spot with the drone and saying we are here. And it's like, well, that's not going to really work well in media. So like all this separation has made that harder, right? And I think certain clients that have like the really good pulse and like really trust their agency leads and people that they work with, I think these people are making some really big changes that we're not seeing right now and taking advantage of the market. And I just, I can't reiterate enough. I really think people need to evaluate how they're looking at this pandemic and look at their advertising spend and see more opportunities than not. And going full circle to kind of what you were saying, I think some businesses started right in 2009, right? Because, well, they had nothing else to do to a degree. Like they were unemployed and they needed to do something. And even me, like I went from not creating content for like 2 years to all of a sudden going live streaming every day, and now having you here to chop and shop for 35 minutes. Like there's opportunities, and I wish, take me as an example, and I think even you, like, we didn't get to talk about your story and how you started the business, but what I would tell people is that you were knocked down and you're saying, yeah, I'm going to get back up and do this. And, here you are now chatting with me and having the luxury to chat with me, because God knows if you and I were still at Zimmerman, we would not have 40 minutes to do a live stream together by any stretch. So,
that would be objectively true.
yeah, I want people to see everything and wrap it up in a bow, per se. And this on a happy note, there's a lot of opportunities. And, I look to my guest today and someone I chop shop with to, see what he's doing in the business and the things that he said and use that as inspiration.
I appreciate that, Tony, and I know that we're winding down on this too, but for anybody listening, this has uplifted me too in that sense. Like, even being able to talk about ideas in an open forum is sort of like the soil for growing more of them. So I think whether you do it on a podcast or if you do it like on a webinar, or you just do it on the phone with a friend. That's another opportunity, right? Like you have theoretically more time than you otherwise would. Pick up the phone, call somebody you haven't spoken to in a while, or somebody who you do speak to, but you don't really talk ideas all the time. That's the soil is fertile right now for that sort of stuff, and this is an exhibit of that. So for that, I'm grateful.
Well, man, as always, great chop and shop with you. Thanks for coming on. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me see. Let me read final comments. Oh, Kelly. Oh, Michelle was listening in too.
Whoa.
Look at you sneaking in. Cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna keep chatting with you guys on comments later. But David, thank you for your time this morning. Love chatting, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon again.
You too, my friend. Thanks again, Tony.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right.